Hi, it's Chris with the Beer Temple, and I have the beers that we have set out for our February Beer of the Month Club. For those of you who don't know, we have a monthly beer club where we pick about 4, 5, 6 different beers in different quantities. You get about 10 different beers, and it's just fun to kind of go through them and see kind of what we have. We have, in no particular order, we have the Andechs Dunkel Weiss. We have a collaboration with Roaring Table and Art History called the Continental System, the classic Allagash White, the Axe Man Double IPA from Surly, and the De La Senne Saison, or Saison de la Senne from Brasserie de la Senne. So let's go through these beers and see why we pick these beers and kind of what we feel is special about each of them. And I will start at the beginning. Let's start with Allagash White, a beer that is most likely one that you have at least seen before, if not tried. And I think in this beer club, we're not just trying to pick the rarest beers that you will never find. We're trying to find interesting beers, beers with stories, and world-class examples of specific styles. And I think this beer is considered by me, certainly, and I think many others, as the archetypal wit beer, aka white ale, a Belgian wheat beer that was actually kind of interestingly, it went extinct. This was a style of beer that was extinct and then became the most popular style of craft beer for a time. That's because Pierre Celis started a brewery called Hoegaarden, and he made a wit beer modeled after the styles of white ale, wheat beers that were used or drank and brewed in the area of Belgium that he grew up in. And from there, the style gradually grew, and then a little beer called Blue Moon came out, and that exploded the style. And it became very popular ever since. It's funny, though, now you don't see as many craft wit beers as you once did, and I really feel it's because it's so hard to compete with Allagash White. This beer has won so many awards. If we're just talking gold medals, I think it's won 4 World Beer Cups, and those, for most of the time, only came out every other year. So, there's only so many that you can win. And I believe 5 golds at the GABF. Now, that's not even counting the silvers and the bronzes that it's won as well. Very, very decorated beer. This is as I mentioned, a wheat beer. And I would say in some way, I think of it as kind of the Belgian answer to a German Hefeweizen. You're going to get some yeast character. Obviously, it's a wheat beer, but they spice it just slightly. The Belgians don't have the Reinheitsgebot, the German purity law that dictates that you can only have malt, or in the case of wheat beer, there is actually a carve-out, wheat, water, yeast, and hops. That's really all you can use in German brewing to be considered under the Reinheitsgebot. Their German purity law for beer. The Belgians don't care about any of that stuff. And what they tend to do is add spices and elements to the beer that complement stuff that's already existing in the beer. Belgian beers just, again, generally are going to be yeast-driven styles of beer. So the Belgian yeast tends to throw off some fruity and spicy characters. So what do the Belgians do in the case of wit beer? They add some fruit and some spice. The fruit is in the form of Curacao orange peel, and the spice is coriander. And it just enhances the presence that's already there given by the yeast. Just wonderful beer. It has a little bit fruity, maybe even hinting towards kind of some bubble gum, just a hint on the nose. You smell a little bit of coriander, not too much. I think one of the things that can go wrong in wit beers is the use of too much coriander. To me, it ends up tasting like hot dog water sometimes when there's too much, as I just continue kind of topping the beer off. As I do that, what I'm allowing the foam to do is kind of settle down and compact and stabilize, and then you kind of build it back up, and that's how you can get it to kind of pop up above the lip of the glass. You can see it's a little hazy. That's from some of the proteins in the wheat as well as the yeast that they use. And so light, so drinkable. Truly, I think one of the best beers in the world right now is this beer right here. I feel very fortunate that we're able to get it in Chicago. A lot of people think that Allagash is kind of available everywhere. It really isn't. We're pretty lucky, especially here in the Midwest, that we get Allagash. But at just over 5%, very sessionable beer. I also think that this beer is amazing in the cold weather and the warm weather. Bell's has a winter wit beer that they do. And it's just a wit. It's not really a winter anything. It's just maybe it uses winter wheat. I don't know. But great with food, great by itself. Great. I'm talking about like 90-degree weather. I think this beer sometimes is even easier to drink in very hot weather, more than a really crisp Pilsner. I'm talking like a true crisp Pilsner, not like a Miller Lite or something like that. I think this beer can even be easier to drink when it's warm than some of those really hopped up Pilsners are. Obviously, I just said in the winter, it's nice too. It just is a little bit fuller in flavor, although it stays very light and has a little bit of kind of a zippy, citrusy element to it as well. So, up next, we're staying with Belgian style beers. This is a Saison. It is from an actual Belgian brewery, Brasserie de la Senne, one of my favorite breweries in the world. And people in the beer industry really have a strong fondness for this brewery and its owner, Yvonne. This is a Saison, as I just mentioned, and it's something that's very much a passion of Yvonne. And this beer is based on not modern Saisons, but actually historic Saisons, which were brewed for the kind of summer laborers who were working the farms as something to kind of quench their thirst. And the way it would go is, according to Yvonne, historically, they would blend some new beer and some old beer. So they would make a fresh brew, and they would blend it into something that was maybe a year or 2 years old. That beer would often be a little bit sour. And in this case, what Yvonne did is he went to Brasserie Cantillon in Belgium, also in Brussels, where Yvonne's brewery is, and Yvonne selected casks specifically for this beer that contained 2-year-old lambic. He then blended it and transferred that blend into wine barrels where it sat for an additional 2 years. It's hard to find this information online, but I got this directly from Yvonne himself. So this is the truth about this beer. So what we now have is almost what you would think of a goose would be, which was it's older lambic blended with new, fresher beer. Now it's not blended with lambic; it's blended with fresh Saison, so it's going to be a little bit more bitter than a goose may be, but a very different Saison or farmhouse ale than you may have had in the past. You can see just a beautiful golden color There's definitely some sediment at the bottom. I think it says on the bottle that you can not pour the sediment, pour out the sediment. It can be drunk separately. So you can pour that separate. I think I might be able to get a little bit more without too much of the sediment. There we are. Beautiful foam. And on this one I'm getting definitely some wild yeast character, some Brettanomyces in this beer. I've got a like a fruitiness, almost like a little bit of an apricot flavor in the background there too, and some of that kind of like phenolic, almost like a rubber note, which I find very pleasant. And for any of the lambic drinkers out there, you may know what I'm talking about, that really pleasant, awesome, almost like rubbery pencil eraser aroma that Brettanomyces can give off. Interesting. So you definitely get some of that citrus, apricot, a lot of apricot and apricot skin, because there's some bitterness there as well. I think you can taste some of the oak. I could be wrong. I'm sure these are used, many times. The barrel said it was blended in, but it feels like there's a little bit of tannin there. But there's a gripping bitterness for sure. So it has a nice kind of finish to it because of the bitterness. I really think that a bite like that helps complete a beer. And it comes both from the acidity and the bitterness, and kind of together it ends up being a quite snappy little beer. Trying to see how strong this is. 6%, so not too terrible. And absolutely very complex beer here. Great kind of lively character as well. Very fine carbonation, but really a solid beer. You gotta like stuff that's a little bit out of the ordinary, but still quite delicious. Reminds me of almost like a Durank XX bitter, a true Belgian, well, they would call it maybe an IPA, but I think it's like a bitter Saison, and mixed with a little bit of lambic from Cantillon. I mean, are you kidding me? That's pretty amazing. Let's go to Germany next. This is the Andechs Weissbier Dunkel. Weissbier being a wheat beer, so we got another wheat beer going. In fact, in the Saison, I think there was wheat or spelt in that beer as well, and there's definitely wheat in lambic. So we're 3 for 3 wheat beers right now, and it just shows how wheat can just be so different. Andechs is a monastic brewery, and it's been around since the 1400s. I think it says right on the bottle somewhere. Yep, 1455. Still a working monastic brewery. A lot of the proceeds actually go to fund the charitable arm of the brewery. They have a really interesting site if you ever want to check that out. And they've been brewing this beer specifically relatively not that long, considering this brewery is from the 1400s. Did they have a beer like this in the past? Very likely, but this beer as it stands, I think, has only been around for about 25 years. I laugh because it's like only 25 years. And you can see wheat beers are often very foamy. The wheat is great at head retention. The foam, like foam retention in a beer. In fact, a lot of breweries will add a little bit of wheat sometimes to their beers to help enhance the foam and the foam stability. If you thought wheat beers needed to be light beers, you can see that it's not. Dunkel means dark, and Helles or hell means light. So that's a little key to German beer buying. If it says Dunkel, dark. Hell, light. So this is their dark wheat beer. And the German wheat yeast is very distinct. So just like with a lot of, just like with grains and hops, the yeast is very specific, and there's many, many, many different types of brewing yeast that are used for different types of beers and for different effect. And one of the most distinct types of brewer's yeast is this German wheat beer yeast. It is renowned for its, again, its fruity and spicy characteristics, much like the Allagash white. You're going to get typically what they say is banana and clove is what you get. But there is no fruit in this beer, or pretty much any German wheat beers, and there are no spices added. This is all going to be coming from the yeast. If you've had Hefeweizen and you get that banana flavor, what I tend to get in Dunkelweisses, dark wheat beers, is almost like a caramelized banana. So it's still there, but those toasted malts almost give it more of like a banana Foster kind of a lean to it for me. I'm trying to hurry this up, but I don't want to hurry it up too much because it looks pretty. So you can see very, very nice looking beer, almost like a chestnut color. I mean, wow. The aroma on this beer is amazing. That last De La Senne might have been really good. I think maybe like a cheese board, charcuterie board, something like that. That beer would be amazing. This, I think you could really, really pair this with a lot. I think this could go with anything from, believe it or not, a salad, to fish, to poultry, to, I think it could go with some desserts, ice cream, anything. This beer is just from the aroma, I can tell that this beer would be very happily paired with a lot of different foods. And the aroma, the flavor follows the aroma perfectly. It's got a little bit of like a nutty, toasty characteristic from the malt, and that yeast plays such a huge role in this beer as well. Really complements the malt, a great banana flavor, and it makes it actually, it tricks you into thinking it's sweeter than it is. This is actually quite a dry beer, but all these fruity flavors kind of trick you into thinking it's sweeter than it really is, which is a little trick that brewers like to play on our palates. Kind of give these flavors that you associate with sweetness, and that allows them to actually dry the beer out a little bit, because your palate and your mind will kind of make the leap to give you that sweetness that you want, while keeping the beer drier and thus more drinkable. Drier beers are more drinkable than sweeter beers. Yum. What a great beer. And you can just continue to top it off. Now, one thing I didn't do was kind of agitate the yeast. I probably should have done that first and gotten all that yeast kind of mixed in with it. Unlike with the De La Senne, where they said you can separate out the sediment, in these wheat beers, you can definitely get it all kind of working in there. What a pretty beer. Let's go with a British-ish style of beer next. We have a collaboration with two suburban Chicago breweries, Roaring Table and Art History. I think two of my favorite breweries in the area. And this beer is called the Continental System. It's a Baltic Porter. For those of you who know what porters are, an English porter is an ale. All beer is either an ale or a lager, because those are the two types of yeast that are used. And then from there you have different types of lager styles, different types of ale styles. And there are hybrid styles as well for those out there saying, well, what about a Kolsch and what about a steam beer? Those are still either lagers or ales. So pretty much every beer is one or the other. Porters are ales, right? Not entirely. Baltic porters are lagers, very often anyway. And in this case, this is a lager. And it's because Baltic porters started out as stronger versions of porters that were used to export. There's a long history of exporting beers and brewing them a little bit stronger to be able to travel better. That's famously what happened with IPA, where they kind of beefed up the pale ale to make it a little bit more stable. Russian Imperial Stout, example there. There's foreign stouts too. There's the Guinness Foreign Extra Stout, a beefed up version of Guinness that was used for the export market. And Baltic Porter is essentially that same thing. They were beefing up the porters and sending them out to the Baltic regions. Now, I know during the Continental system, sorry, let me collect my thoughts. The Continental system was during the Napoleonic Wars. There was, I think, embargoes on the British, and they weren't able to ship out or maybe blockade is a better word. They weren't able to get the porters over to the Baltic region, and that is one of several reasons that they started making these Baltic porters in-house, domestically, in the Baltic region. And they were using their local lager yeasts instead of their ale yeast, which is just a long way of saying these Baltic porters became lagers. So this is going to be a beefier beer, 6.7, so a little bit stronger now. And I mean, look at that dark color. Really nice kind of garnet, chestnut color. It may look almost black on the camera, I don't know, but it's actually a beautiful kind of like ruby red color, and just very, very pretty beer. A lot of coffee on the nose, chocolate and coffee, just really nice roast characteristics. You're not getting that same fruitiness that you may get dried fruit from a porter, and that's because the lager yeast is going to suppress some of those fruity and spicy flavors that the Belgians love to enhance. Lager is all about suppressing those characteristics. Oh man, I mean, it's like a cleaner porter. It's just like a really nice, super clean porter. You get a lot of that kind of roasty, almost a hint of like an ashy quality to it. Nice, just coffee. All the things that you can think of when you're kind of roasting. Think of roasted things. You know, you roast coffee beans, you roast nuts. All those flavors. Those same flavors are produced when you roast malt the same way. So those same flavors are coming here. So you're going to get all those like nutty, coffee, chocolate flavors, and you can, just see. Yeah, really nice like nutty coffee flavor. If you like stouts and porters, this is a great style to dive into. Here at the shop we have some of the original, I think we have the first two original Baltic porters that were made in the Baltic regions here as well. So you can still get the classics, which is pretty cool. But this one is domestic, and I think it's a great representation of the beer. Last but certainly not least, we have to include something hoppy in the beer of the month. People would revolt otherwise. So we have perhaps the most acclaimed beer, certainly one of them, from Surly out of Minnesota. This is Axe Man. Used to be called Todd the Axe Man, named after their former head brewer. It's an Imperial IPA. I said the big brewing regions would all be represented. So we have Belgium, we have Germany. I don't know if the Baltic regions are classic, brewing regions, but certainly England is, and porters kind of originated from there. This one is kind of dual. I think nowadays the U.S. is certainly, for craft beer, the place globally, but this is based on a English beer style. Pale ale is an English beer style. So this beer is going to be the strongest of the 5 that I've sampled. It's going to be over 7%. Imperial IPA, 7.2. I'd say anything over 7 and above. Well, I don't know. 7. This is just an India Pale Ale. I take it back. It's not an Imperial IPA. I was looking at it. I was like, I think 8 is kind of the limit. Once it's 8% or above, it's an Imperial IPA. But this is just a straight up IPA here. 7.2. It's got Citra and Mosaic, which I'm sure is music to you hop lovers' ears out there. So expect it to be a lot of kind of grapefruit and orange, maybe some tropical flavors, some green flavors as well. Oh, man. Yeah. I mean, grapefruit and like gummy peach rings for days in this. Also, the head, so much different than the previous 4 beers. Let me see if I can get that going. But still beautiful how it kind of shakes. You can jiggle that head around a little bit. You can see it's going to be a fairly light colored beer, fairly clear, still a little bit of haze there. I certainly would not consider this a hazy beer, but all these aromas you're getting, again, they're from the hops. This is maybe a little bit of the yeast, and it's not the malt, and it's not the water that's giving these fruity. I certainly hope it's not the water that's giving these fruity flavors. This is all coming from the hops. No actual fruit added, just those hop oils. Really nice beer. It's awesome how this beer is designed to kind of, it's all built around these flavors of the hops. And hear me out. I mean, that might seem very obvious, but you have this super juicy, fruity aroma coming from the hops and flavor. And like I mentioned before, sometimes it allows you to like lean these beers out and make them a little bit drier. In this case, they do a little bit of both. They give you some sweetness right at the beginning, and just kind of from that malt, it allows you to have it taste even fruitier, right? You have that fruity aroma, that fruity flavor, a little bit of sweetness that you would get from a fruit beer, or from a fruit, sorry, and you're just like, this is perfect. Then the other thing that the hops do, the bitterness comes in. Bitterness kind of counteracts our ability to taste sweetness. It also, we taste it generally a little bit slower than we taste sweetness. We taste sweet things very quickly. We taste bitter things generally slower than a comparable amount of sweetness would be. So that is how the beer develops on your palate. You get that fruity flavor, you get the sweetness, and then what's this? It's the bitterness drying out the beer. Right now, in my mouth, I don't taste any of that sweetness. The beer hasn't become less sweet in my mouth. It's the bitterness has had time to kind of counteract the sweet flavors that I'm perceiving. So now my mouth is dry. What do you do when your mouth is dry? You pick up something wet and you drink it again. Oh, I'm getting those flavors, the sweetness. It's there. And now, since I'm already primed for the sweetness, it dries out even faster the second time. So, and away we go. Like I said, these brewers know what they're doing, and this is just a really well-made American IPA using awesome hops and just really well put together. It's great. To me, this is a bit of a throwback IPA, which I think are coming back into style because I think they are some of the best American IPAs ever been made, or in this style. I would call this almost like a Midwest Coast IPA. So it's like a West Coast IPA with a little bit of malt sweetness to it, but still light in color. And just a wonderful beer, and a great beer to end on. I hope that you guys enjoyed the little walkthrough with our February Beer of the Month Club. I'll put a link to the Beer of the Month Club. We have been doing this for, I think over 10 years now, believe it or not. Kind of on the sly. We don't promote it too much, but it's there. Probably should promote it a little bit more. And yeah, this is basically what we do every month. It's kind of come up with a nice curated beer experience. We do write-ups. Now we're doing videos. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought. If you have any questions about any of the beers, let me know. And we'll see you next month for a walkthrough of the March Beer of the Month picks.